Senator Feinstein.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dorsey, in recent hearings before the Senate Commerce Committee, you said, I think, that Twitter has a policy against misinformation relating to civic integrity. President Trump and his allies have tweeted hundreds of false claims about the 2020 election. Trump has falsely claimed victory and alleged widespread voter fraud. So here's the question. Does misinformation about the results of an election and voter fraud relate to civic integrity? Why or why not?
Yes, it does, and we label those tweets when the election has not been called yet, or multiple sources have called it differently.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Did you say you have been able to tweet?
No, we have labeled the tweets that would indicate a different result in the election, called by multiple sources.
I see. At what point was that done?
Throughout the period, October 11th to up till today.
So when the tweet was initially came in, how long was it before you, quote, updated it?
We didn't update it. We put a label on it, pointing to the broader conversation. Our goal is to connect people with more information around what's happening with the election, and that was that occurred anywhere from 5 minutes to 30 minutes, but as quickly as we can.
Thank you. Is 30 minutes the maximum time?
I don't know. We can get you that information.
Would
we'll
you?
follow up.
I'm interested in this. Does misinformation about the results of an election and voter fraud relate to civic integrity? Why or why not?
Yes, it does, and we also label those tweets that would indicate whether fraud was happening. And again, we connect those to larger conversations on the platform. So we want to provide context here. That is our goal, providing more context, providing more information.
Okay, now a specific question, and I'm not sure actually what the answer to this should be, but on November 7, President Trump tweeted, and I quote, "I won this election by a lot," end quote. Obviously, that's not true. President Trump lost the election. The warning label that Twitter has applied to the tweet says, and I quote, "Official sources may not have called the race when this was tweeted," end quote. Do you believe that label goes far enough to prevent the tweet's harms when the tweet is still visible and not accurate?
I do, because it's not just the surface level label. It points to a collection of news articles, of information and conversation that gives you an expansion on what's happening with the election.
I guess, you see, my concerns are that these tweets arouse people. And it seems to me that the entity that runs this operation ought to have an understanding that when there is a major situation, that the tweets can play a unique role in either reassuring or stirring people up to unacceptable levels. Could you comment on that?
Well, I agree in spirit. I mean, our policy is focused on misleading information around the election and the civic process to provide greater context, to provide additive information so that people can make decisions around what's happening within the election. And that is 3 phases. That's the run up to the election, that's election day, and also the phase we're in right now, post-election. So our policies and enforcement are focused on providing more information, more context to people in those 3 phases.
Well, let me give you a specific. On November 7, President Trump tweeted this, "I won this election by a lot," end quote. That's obviously not true. President Trump lost the election. The warning label that Twitter has applied to the tweet says, and I quote, official sources may not have called the race when this was tweeted, end quote. Now, here's the question. Does that label do enough to prevent the tweet's harms when the tweet is still visible and is not accurate?
I believe it's really important that we show people a broader context, and that is the intention of the label. It is not just text below a tweet. It is a link to connect to a much larger conversation and news articles across the spectrum.
Well, give me an example. What would have to happen before the situation would warrant a stronger response?
Well, we did have stronger responses during Election Day and the week after, where we did put an interstitial, meaning that you had to click through to see the content of the tweet, and it limited spread for anything that went against our civic integrity policy, including premature calls to election results.
Well, let me give you one more. On November 12, President Trump tweeted a conspiracy theory that 2.7 million votes for him were deleted. The warning label that Twitter has applied to that tweet said, quote, "This claim about election fraud is disputed." Now, here's the question, and I think it is a tough issue. Do you believe this label does enough to prevent the tweet's harms? When the tweet is still visible, it's a highly emotional situation, but the tweet has no factual basis.
But the tweet has a link to more information, to more conversation, and more context that informs the situation, what's happening. So I do believe that connecting people to the larger conversation, giving them more context, is the right path here.
But they have to move to solicit that contact, right? It's not contained as an addendum to the original tweet.
The label is an addendum to the original tweet, and if you tap on it or click it, you will go to an expansion of the information.
I see. Can I ask a question, Mr. Zuckerberg? Is he?
Yes, you may. If you want
Thank
more,
you.
if that'd be okay.
Mr. Zuckerberg, at the recent hearing before the Senate Commerce Committee, you said that Facebook has a, quote, policy in place that prevents any candidate, end quote, from, quote, trying to delegitimize the result of the election, end quote. But the hashtags steal the vote and voter fraud garnered more than 300,000 interactions on your platform in the hours after Mr. Trump falsely declared victory. So here's the question. Do you believe Facebook did enough to prevent Trump's efforts to delegitimize the election result? If so, why have you reached that conclusion?
Senator, I believe that we've taken some very significant steps in this area, not just the adding additional context to specific posts and making it so that when people search for different hashtags, we show additional information, but we also took the unprecedented step of putting the Voter Information Center at the top of Facebook and Instagram for everyone in the U.S. that showed them reliable information about the election, including partnering with organizations like Reuters and the National Election Pool to show them accurate information about the results of the election. So all taken together, I think that we really went quite far in terms of helping to distribute reliable and accurate information about what was going on during this election.
Okay, let me give you one more along this line. After President Trump falsely claimed that the election was being stolen, a group called Stop the Steal was started on Facebook. It grew to more than 300,000 users in less than a day, making it one of the fastest growing groups, I understand, in Facebook history. You shut the group down, but substantial damage already had been done. Trump supporters, some of them armed with assault weapons, held Stop the Steal rallies outside election offices. In Philadelphia, 2 armed supporters who had traveled from Virginia were arrested on their way to the city's vote counting center. Here's the question, and this is a tough one. What are your concerns about the spread of misinformation, no matter how innocent it is, or it is not innocent, like Trump's claims about the election, that they may incite violence?
Senator, I'm very worried about this, especially any misinformation or content that could incite violence. And during such a volatile period like this, one of our top priorities is making sure that people don't use our platform to organize any violence or civil unrest. And that was the basis under which we took that group, because there were a number of members who were posting potentially violent or encouraging violent comments that violated our policies. We also have broader policies in place around trying to slow the spread of misinformation more broadly, even when it's not going to lead to some kind of violence or imminent harm. And that's why we've created this independent fact-checking program where we work with more than 80 partners around the world to help do fact-checking, because people in our community have told us they don't want to see misinformation, but they also don't want us to be deciding what is true and false. So we've taken the step of building this program, which I believe is more sophisticated than what anyone else in our industry has. So I'm very focused on these issues.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, because I'm really struck by it, that people armed with assault weapons as a product of a tweet could rally outside an election office. And I think it's really a serious issue that needs to be considered. And there need to be, once you signal that and people respond to it, it has to be in some way abated or some way pointed out or restructured on the internet itself. Now, can you respond to that?
Senator Feinstein,
And concerns?
I hate to, we're almost double the time. Could we?
I'm sorry.
That's all right.